Started. All right, welcome everybody to our quarterly NASEO Buildings Committee meeting. I'm surprised to say that it is well into Q2 and into Q3 almost, so the year is just slipping by, but great to see this turnout on a Friday afternoon. Appreciate all of your interest in the Buildings Committee. I'm thrilled to be joined by Julie Staveland, who will be primarily moderating our session today and also is one of the co-chairs of the NASEO Buildings Committee. So I'll pass it over to her shortly. But before diving into that, I also want to provide a few NASEO updates. The NASEO team is hard at work pulling together an agenda for our inaugural National Buildings Summit. This will be happening from September 8th through 9th, and the event page, I don't have handy, so if Liepa or Rod or anybody else on the NASEO team is able to drop that into the chat, that'd be very helpful. The event page is live, as well as a call for proposals link, which I do have handy, that we've sent out through various channels and want to bump again here. So I've just dropped that into the chat. We'll be accepting calls or proposals for sessions through June 23rd and welcome anybody in this group to obviously submit a proposed session. They don't have to be extremely detailed yet, but that's just to generate some ideas and also gauge interest across you all who hopefully will be able to attend and join us come September in that event. So that is one big announcement from the NASEO team. Otherwise, in case you missed it, our last meeting happened back in March of this year and featured the Smart Surfaces Coalition, where Bill Updike spoke about the various resources at Smart Surfaces that the Smart Surfaces Coalition has pulled together in support of broader adoption at the state and local levels for smart surfaces, which include cool roofs, cool walls. And so if you've missed any of that, all of our past webinars can be found on the Buildings Committee website, which I've just dropped into the chat as well. And so I encourage you to check that out. And then kind of running through our major focus areas, both Maddie and Alana from the NASEO team are on well-deserved vacations this week, so aren't able to join us today to provide the residential update. However, they do want to encourage any folks who are interested in joining the residential rebate call series that don't already have those on their calendars to reach out to them. They've been hosting various topical calls with states on topics like measured savings, retail engagement, coordination with weatherization programs, as well as working with states based on their implementation phases on those, on creating cohorts to engage those states in a more strategic manner. So do feel free to reach out to Maddie and Alana on those topics, and I'll be able to drop their email addresses in the chat shortly. Otherwise, we would also like to highlight a few interesting resources coming out of the DOE ESPC campaign, which I realize has like flown under the radar for some of our recent Buildings Committee check-ins. This is a campaign that DOE runs that is fairly related to what we'll be chatting about today, that has put out several recent events, including a peer exchange led by our Southeast Regional Leadership Regional Representative Chris Anderson about GEFA's, the Georgia Energy Finance Authority's success using the eProject Express platform from DOE, as well as several new resources to achieve a free accreditation through the Performance Contracting National Resource Center. I think these are all more helpful when compiled in the same place. So I'll be sure to drop some of these links and relevant mentions in the chat below as well. And then I do want to open it up to some of my other NASEO colleagues that are joining us on the call here. Oh, thank you, Rod. I see that you're dropping in some very helpful links as well. Um, so Rodney and Liepa, if you have any updates for the group too.
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. Just following on this ESPC campaign, this actually has been going on for a while. DOE had developed this in collaboration with us and NAESCO, which is the Association of the Energy Service Companies, Energy Services Coalition, and others to support uptake of energy savings performance contracting and also to enhance the quality of the contracting and support states and localities, the so-called mush market, in being able to use these mechanisms and use them smartly. So I'd encourage clicking on the links about that. I can go on more, but I don't want to take up too much time. Um, and just let us know if you have any questions on this. Sam Kramer and I are working on that topic a bit. And I'll mention with respect to our Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings Working Group, which is really about demand flexibility and grid edge and virtual power plants and related stuff, and is overlaps the Buildings Committee, the Electricity Committee, and to some extent transportation as well. We are continuing to provide resources and updates to our working group, and we had hoped to have had in May a webinar on uh, using distributed energy resources to provide distributed grid services. Unfortunately, the way DOE is, they did not in time approve our speaker's ability to present on that topic. They were going to present on a paper that they did for DOE. So we're looking, I hope, to reschedule for July and have a workaround on the DOE requirements. I'll also mention we're doing a lot of this is in collaboration with our electricity team. So we have pretty regular updates on this. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to the California Efficiency and Demand Management Council on energy efficiency and demand flexibility. They were very interested in what's happening in other states as well. And I'll also make a mention that our colleagues in the electricity program are operating a series of webinars on data centers and load growth. So that has links to energy efficiency and demand flexibility, as well as sort of the bigger stuff of more generation. So I've talked too much already. So thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Rodney. Liepa, anything to add before we turn it over to Julie?
No additional updates for me. Thanks, Jasmine.
Great. Well, we took up enough of your time with the real exciting parts of the webinar, so I'll pass things over to Julie now to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Jasmine. Just confirming you guys can see my slides and you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So, hi everybody, Julie Staveland. I'm the Assistant Division Director for the Materials Management Division for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and the Designated State Energy Office Director. And with me today, I also have Cody Evans, who is my Community Programs Coordinator, who I'm going to be tapping in here to help talk about kind of stuff that we're doing here in Michigan before we hand it over to our panelists. So I like to give a little background just because I know we're all coming from energy offices and we always wonder how everybody's organized and what funding sources they have. So within our area, we also oversee recycling and pollution prevention. We've got about 10 staff within the energy services area that manage a lot of our state energy program dollars. And our normal funding comes obviously from DOE, but we also get EPA and some state funding as well. And then with the fun advent of all of the stimulus programs through IIJA, IRA, and then through state supplemental funding, we've gotten some additional bumps over the last couple of years as well. The majority of these are flowing through us, although there are a couple that we do partner with other departments within and agencies within the state on, such as the NEVI program, as well as the CPRG and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And all of that is, of course, caveat to what's happening at the feds right now. So we don't know what's happening. A lot of, I guess I will say just on this, in terms of our funding, like we still have access to everything that we've been awarded to, and we haven't seen a delay on payments on our side. So fingers crossed, we're hoping that that stays kind of productive through the end of our awards that we currently have. All of our programs kind of focus on kind of these 5 key pillars. We focus on communities, industry, ensuring equitable access, mobility, and then workforce. But obviously today we're talking about kind of local governments and public buildings. And so I wanted to give a little bit of history of where we have taken our community program because it led to us being, I feel like, really successful with our EECBG funding. So when I came on board in 2018, I was kind of, in a different position and was given kind of the flexibility to redesign how we work with local governments in Michigan. And so our new approach was really designed to meet them where they're at, right? Rather than just saying we're only going to provide funding for assessments or we're only going to provide funding for plans. We weren't seeing a lot of uptake and just the influence and trajectory of communities, we just weren't seeing that traction in getting communities to participate in our funding opportunities. So we restructured it to meet them wherever they were at, right? When you look at the allowable activities within state energy program funding, right, there's a full range of projects that are eligible for local governments. So we really tried to provide them with an opportunity to incentivize them to take action, right? Whether it was just getting started in terms of benchmarking and getting energy audits done, or actually being able to take action on those items that were identified within their energy audits, and then eventually transition to renewable energy. So that was kind of like the mantra we preached to everybody was make sure that you're energy efficient before you transition to renewables. And then targeting, of course, local governments, our tribes within Michigan, and then also opening it up to kind of the local nonprofits within a community that were providing a public service. We still weren't seeing a lot of traction though. I mean, we were giving out basically like free money. We reduced the burden of applying. We really reduced the match rate. We just still weren't seeing a big ton of traction. So we decided to partner with the University of Michigan and kind of do this planning and technical assistance and really assess where our local governments were at. So Michigan has 1,856 jurisdictions from urban centers to our rural small towns. So we did like an initial assessment. We wanted a baseline to see where our communities were at. How do they think about energy? How do they plan for energy? Are they doing any zoning on it, right? Just kind of identify where those gaps are in terms of local governments and how they manage their jurisdiction and where they think about energy. And so with this kind of got us thinking, not only like, okay, we obviously see that of the 70% plus response rate that we got, that not a lot of people have energy on their radar, so we need to do a lot more marketing. But we saw that there was an interest in what were other of their peers doing within the state, in terms of like zoning, especially for renewable energy. So we kicked off kind of this whole campaign of cataloging and curating where the communities are at. Do they have any zoning established, right? Who has the authority for that? For the large scale wind and solar, residential wind or residential solar, energy storage. I mean, even anything for like EV infrastructure. And then providing kind of those tools and resources, right? So we did a comprehensive webinar series that broke down everything within a local government's control related to energy that they would ever want to know about into 1-hour webinars through our Catalyst Communities initiative. And that was recorded and it's available on our website. So regardless of where they were at, they could watch these webinars, take a little bit of notes, and try and see where they wanted to take their community. As well as putting online an online free database where they could see other zoning ordinances related to energy with their peers within Michigan. We also continued to provide some of the technical assistance that was available to them. So we took them on tours to facilities that had already gone through energy efficiency upgrades and that were transitioning to renewables, to going out to large scale wind and solar facilities, and really just trying to meet the local governments where they were at and set them up for success, providing them with the tools and resources that they needed to take action, and then also linking that to our regular annual program, the Community Energy Management Program, that they could apply for funding to then take action on the stuff that they had learned. And then I'm not going to get into the Catalyst community stuff too much, but if you're interested in checking it out, we've got it all on our website. We kind of tied in some of the sustainability stuff too, in terms of like materials management and water and mobility. But this is, just tied into some resources that we provided. So over the last 6 years, we've really built up this strong foundation of being a resource for local governments, of providing them with technical assistance and providing them with grant funding opportunities. So then when it came time, to really have a robust program, our community program now includes this whole menu of options for local governments, right? Not just for community energy management in terms of like their own buildings, right? But where do they want to go in terms of their planning and zoning for renewable energy, and then looking at them sustainably in a resilient community as well. So we had a really robust program established for all of our local governments to participate in. And then came the stimulus funding with EECBG, and it was almost like, I don't know, it was like fortuitous that they were going to, put this funding out. All the legwork that we did aligned really nicely with how we had set up our program. So instead of all offering separate RFPs, we decided to combine it because it's still targeting local government. So we issued one RFP that had essentially, we put in 3 pots of funding because we also included our SEP BIL stimulus funding. But for the SEP portion, right, that was any local government. Anybody could have that type of funding. But for the EECBG, it was obviously that select group of local governments who were eligible for funding that didn't have the direct allocation, and were not already receiving that funding. And then we, again, applied that concept of meeting them where they're at. So we opened up the whole spectrum to, provide them with incentive funding to take action on their energy management goals. And I'm going to hand it over to Cody to talk about the next group of what we did with it.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Cody, and I am the Community Programs Coordinator here at Eagle. I work under Julie and manage the CEM, or Community Energy Management Program. So kind of just going to touch on where we're at right now in the last year or so. So as Julie mentioned, the program provides financial and technical assistance to communities across Michigan and allows for a pretty wide variety of project areas, which again helps us meet communities wherever they're at in the energy management journey. So this program structure really allowed us to pretty seamlessly tie in this influx of funding from the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, or EECBG, which significantly increased the number of communities that could participate and the size of projects that they could complete. So this past year, we awarded $2.7 million in just EECBG funding through the CEM program. So 34 communities were awarded funding spanning over 20 different counties across Michigan. Many of these awards went to our rural communities, cities and villages across the state, and for some, this was their first grant that they've been awarded. You can go to the next slide, Julie. Thanks. In addition to be able to expand the program's reach, this funding also enabled us to further build on our existing relationships with communities that we established through the program and how we kind of restructured it throughout the years. So I have a case study here that I just wanted to share really quick. The city of Sault Ste. Marie, located in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, is a great example of this. A few years ago, the city was awarded a CEM grant to replace aging and energy inefficient light fixtures at their city hall. Of course, this was before any of the larger funding sources were available. So the award was smaller and only covered the first phase of what they identified as a need for LED lighting replacements, which included a few dozen light fixtures. Fast forward to the addition of EECBG funding to the program, and we're now able to substantially build on the progress we've made. This time around, the city is awarded a larger grant And instead of retrofitting a few dozen light fixtures, they're able to replace a few hundred, completing all phases of the building's LED retrofit. In the end, over 600 fixtures were replaced with LEDs, and the city is estimated to save over 42,000 kilowatt hours of energy each year from this project, just this project. So this is just, one example of the impact these resources can have and how program design can multiply that impact. And this kind of relationship building by again, meeting communities where they're at is key to the program success, and is something that we're going to continue to build on well beyond well beyond these larger funding sources. So with
Awesome.
that, I'll
Thanks,
pass it back to
Cody.
Mhm.
Sorry, my dogs are barking in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. So with that, we have two awesome panelists today. Yosti Storms with the Alaska Energy Authority. She's the project and program manager. And then Chaz Reynolds with Schneider Electric, who's the public sector program manager. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Yosti.
Just gonna make sure I'm unmuted. So I'll be sharing my slides. Just gonna navigate to them really quick. Right. So everybody should be able to see those. Okay, right?
Almost. I don't know. Is anybody else seeing it? Oh, there it is. I see it on my end now. You're good, Yosti.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Yosti Storms. I'm a program project manager with the Alaska Energy Authority up here. And AEA, so I'll refer to it as AEA, is the state's energy office. And I joined AEA back in 2023. So right when I started, I had the honor of submitting our application for our EECBG formula funds. And so I've kind of been helping with the program ever since then. So a little bit about AEA. So our mission is to reduce the cost of energy in Alaska. And to achieve this mission, we strive to diversify Alaska's energy portfolio, increasing resiliency, reliability, and redundancy. So although I work specifically with the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Group, we have different groups here that are focused on different areas. So we have Relevant Energy, or we refer to them as own assets. We also have our Power Cost Equalization Program, Rural Energy, Energy Planning, grants, of course, grants and loans, and then the RTO, Rail Belt Transmission Organization. And I will say, like, as the program project manager working with the renewable energy and energy efficiency, most of what I do is going to be focused on energy efficiency and conservation. And these are all of our current active projects across the state. Alaska's pretty massive, so we have quite a few things going on in Alaska. Just leave this up here for a second. And like I said, I'm with the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Group. And these are the different things we focus on. So we do a lot of different public outreach. So we have an EV working group, Energy Efficiency Partnership Group, and that's actually one of the groups I oversee. We have a solar working group, a wind working group, and a wood working group. And our team just focuses on the different renewables. And our goal is to provide programming that focuses on technical and financial support for communities interested in developing renewable energy programs with the aim of growing our state's clean economy. So with our EECBG funding, we were actually able to expand VEEP, which is the Village Energy Efficiency Program, to include renewables, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But VEEP kind of is the base of what we're doing with EECBG. But this was established in 2010 to reduce per capita consumption through energy efficiency. So although these projects were energy efficiency focused, the funding back then was, of course, from the state energy program, the Denali Commission, Wells Fargo. Projects were focused on lighting upgrades, window and garage weatherization, HVAC system upgrades. Since inception of VEEP, We estimated that around $600,000 in annual cost savings were achieved by the awarded communities. And some of the photos that you'll see in the next couple slides, these are from the different projects that we did. So this is an outdoor lighting project in Carluke. And then this is another outdoor lighting project in Kungiganak. So like I mentioned, what we did with our EECBG funding and also some of our SEP bill funding was to expand VEAP to include renewable energy projects. So it was to award sub-grants to finance building scale renewable energy, energy efficiency, and conservation projects in public facilities in rural Alaska. So like Michigan, we also opened it up to all the local governments that weren't eligible to receive or apply for direct EECPG funding. And then, so we did 2 rounds of funding, or we did 2 rounds of applications for REVEAP. The first time we did it, I don't think there was not enough time for I think our communities to apply. And so we opened up a second round and were able to get more applications that second time. Because I think there was interest, but just for some of our communities up here in Alaska, they're really small, and most times you have people who are wearing multiple hats and doing different things. So sometimes there's a capacity issue there. So anyways, we were able to fund REVEAP with EECBG funding and SEP bill. There was a no cost match requirement. We did ask communities that were applying or local governments that were applying, we did let them know that there would be an optional cost match for them if they wanted to provide that, but it was not required. We have awarded about 84% of our EECBG award to communities. So 1.3 million of our EECBG award went to our communities, and then 200,000 of our SIP bill funding was also awarded for a different project. Sub-grants that were awarded are expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce total energy use, improve energy efficiency, enhance energy security, advance state-led energy initiatives, and increase energy affordability. This is a summary of our awarded projects and the anticipated energy savings for each of these communities. And then it also highlights the 2 rounds that we did. So you could see the communities that were awarded in round 1, and then those that were awarded in round 2. And there's a lot here, so just a couple seconds. And in addition to REVEAP, I mentioned that I also manage and help with our Alaska Energy Efficiency Partnership, AEEP. So we're a group that is working together towards the shared vision of Alaska becoming the most energy efficient state in the nation. So we're a stakeholder group of over 500 or over 50 public, private, and nonprofit organizations. It is led by AEA, and we do quarterly meetings. So we're able to exchange different energy insights and efforts and talk about different funding opportunities, project updates, and then anyone in the state who's interested in attending, they can participate because we do offer the option to meet in person or over Teams. And then if you're interested in getting involved, we've had folks from out of state also participate just because they're interested in learning more about what we're doing. So we have a listserv, so you can sign up for that listserv, and then invites will go out to notify you of the quarterly meetings. And I also want to share too that VEAP, our REVEAP, is also capitalized often. So we always tell folks to check back for opportunities. That's all I have. Thank you.
Couldn't find my mute button fast enough, sorry. Thanks, Yosti. That was great.
Thank you,
Um,
Julie.
Side note, are you going to be at the Western meeting next week? I'll be there. Hopefully we'll see you in
To-
person.
Today is actually my last day with AEA.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I have a new job opportunity lined up
Oh,
later
awesome.
on this month.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we'll hand it over to you, Jazz.
Thank you very much, Julie. And I loved hearing all about all those projects. Steve, thanks for sharing those. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Hey, Julie, would you mind confirming that you can see that? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Well, hi everyone. My name is Chaz Reynolds, and I'm with Schneider Electric. I'm the buying program manager, specializing in public sector and supporting our sales teams and clients and sustainably procuring projects and also just finding creative funding methods. So I think this is so applicable. Julie and Cody and Yosti all did such an amazing job talking about the different programs they have. I'm actually really excited to follow up with them later on about those. But I really wanted to highlight just some examples of public-private partnerships that we've worked in. But first, just a little bit about me. Like I said, that's my role with Schneider Electric. But really, first and foremost, I'm a husband and dad. I studied environmental engineering at school just because I love being outdoors and really wanted to be able to just, as Schneider says, create an impact by empowering us to make the most of our energy and resources. But it's to keep life is on for little ones like my 6-month-old here, Hadley. So I figured I needed to lighten the mood on a Friday meeting. So here's a funny picture of her at the beach. Um, I've learned in 6 months that parents share pictures of their kids whether you want them to or not. So here you go. All right. Moving on though. So Schneider Electric, if you haven't heard of us, we are all around the world. We have 37 billion almost in revenue a few years ago with 135,000 employees around the country. But specifically in North America and the US, we've got this number's actually grown. So it's almost 20,000 employees here locally. So, in finding a few examples to highlight, there's actually a lot. So, I just picked one, but here's a few that you might have heard of. I know Jasmine really likes this Brookville bus depot, but I've also heard that's been evangelized and talked about a lot. But a pretty amazing project that really it converted almost to 100% renewable energy from a microgrid solution with the bus depot. And then this port of Long Beach, where really, as you can see, they converted to 100% resilient energy because they had an anticipated quadrupling of energy load, which I think a lot of us are seeing as data centers are becoming more prevalent and AI is and everything else is transitioning. But I'm going to focus in on Dallas County with a really cool project there where they had over $71 million in savings. And I think this one holds a special place in my heart because I live in Dallas right now. I'm a Floridian, but once you move to Texas, you are a Texan and you just got to embrace it. All right, so this Dallas County project, it was pretty neat because I think it's very applicable to really every state. I think there's aging infrastructure all around the country. I think a lot of people have backlogs of deferred maintenance that they don't have the money to be able to actually address. I love the EECG. Julie, I've really got to get some practice on that. The EECBG
You got
grant.
it. You got it.
I'm gonna get it eventually. It's a mouthful, but I love that they're putting some of those funds to use to be able to address that. But here in Dallas, they were losing $1 million a month, which is just wild to think about. Just from outdated technology, inefficient lighting, all kinds of things that extended far beyond that even. So really, we brought just a really creative solution to Dallas because they were kind of stuck. All right. So with that much, that the big elephant that they had to try and bite off, what we did was we brought just a really unified effort. So we took a look, we kind of zoomed out and looked at the entire Dallas County so that we could see all 54 buildings, all 6 million square feet, and to create this energy roadmap for the whole thing. All right. And because of that, What's neat is that it was a unique delivery method just because then it didn't just have a one-off fix that missed the entire solution and you had lots of patchwork. It was really a comprehensive solution that that was just built well together. And so the way that they broke that up, because I think that's important. Sometimes it can get so big that you can't make it small. So they made it small by going into each maintenance group. So each maintenance group really intimately knew their set of buildings. So we met individually with each group and of those maintenance folks and just did a deep dive so that we could understand their priorities and really let them lead what was most important to them, while also obviously looking for energy efficiencies. So this project was an energy savings performance contract. It started out as 4 phases because they were kind of just dipping their toes in. And I say that it was a pretty large project to begin with. But when I talked to some of the project managers, the thing that they loved the most was that Dallas County came back and they wanted more and more and more because they just had such a good experience and had saved so much money, and retrofitted a lot of this existing infrastructure that they came back for an additional 4 phases. So it targeted electrical distribution, creating more just safe and just having more power reliability. I'm sure people heard about the blackouts in Texas whenever we had the winter storm a year or two ago. So everything with that, upgrading lighting systems, you heard about a lot of those that Yosti mentioned up in Alaska. So they did similar things down here, converting to LED, adding occupancy sensors, and then also just retrofitting all of the building automation and HVAC controls, trying to get some end of life things flipped around. And then another part that's neat about you don't think of this from a company that focuses on energy, but with water conservation, that's another big source of energy loss and also just funds loss. So they looked at water conservation controls and fixtures, because it was really a pretty diverse group of buildings that some were concentrated, some were spread out. There's everything from office buildings to correctional facilities. So it was a pretty comprehensive but also complex project there. So let's just tie in to the customer benefits. So really what Dallas County got out of it was they got this 6 million square feet of 54 buildings updated. They reduced utility costs significantly, almost by a quarter, saved $71 million, which is what funded a lot of this project. So they didn't have a lot of capital investment in the front end. They were funding it along the way with different energy efficient upgrades along the way there. And like I said, the thing that I loved is that it was a holistic approach. So they didn't have a lot of patchwork. It was just this really comprehensive project that worked together to just provide a roadmap for the future. And I'm going to provide my contact information. So I know I'm going through some information quickly, but if you have questions, you can feel free to ask me afterwards. So I wanted to give you an example of a project, but then I really wanted to relate it to you guys. That's why I think you're here, is to find ways to use funding. How can you just look at your entities, your state to do this? And I saw this interesting stat that 32% of local government entities don't have a sustainability plan or any associated goals. All right, so for at Schneider, we have this 10-step process, but it starts with developing this net zero, this decarbonization roadmap. Right? If you don't, and I love that Julie already talked about this too. I think yours, Julie, I wrote it down, was benchmark, energy audit, energy efficiency upgrades, and then renewable energy. And you
Yep.
said kind of, if you don't know where the benchmarks are, you can't do the other things yet. So I think we're totally aligned with that. I love that you guys already have that in place and are working on that. But yeah, so you've got to start with that. And so that's where I wanted to go next. Um, I'll leave this, I think Jasmine isn't going to distribute this, so I'm not going to talk through this. This is a very wordy slide. But the biggest thing is just on the solution and value props is one thing that I love about working for Schneider is that we have so many very specialized companies within this large umbrella that we can provide this really comprehensive solution. So that's what all of those different elements are, is it's not just one size fits all. It's actually a lot of really unique local specialized companies that fit in for this big solution. All right, so I'm going to drop this one in the slide. I'm not a great multitasker, so I don't know if you can do this while I'm talking. So maybe follow up and do this later. But if you haven't done this, I think this is a really cool exercise to do. This is a sustainability roadmap, and there's a little scale here. I don't know if this gives some people PTSD and goes back to like being in school and being graded, but sometimes it's good to know where you fall. So it'll show you there 0 to 4 is a beginner, 5 to 7 is intermediate, and then advanced is 8 to 10. So, it's just asking things in this very first phase of strategizing. Do you know how much your current CO2 emissions are from your buildings? All right. Are you seeking sustainability certifications in those buildings, or is that not a big deal to you? And I don't think it matters necessarily if the answer is yes or no. It's just good to know where you're at. And this is kind of the easy button too. That's the other thing I like. I don't remember who coined that, but everyone loves the easy button. And this is just step two. So going back to what Julie was talking about, you can't do energy efficiency upgrades, and you definitely can't do renewable energy until you actually know where they are. So this is starting to monitor, starting to realize what you're actually doing. So, do you manage multiple building sites using a single integrated BMS system? Right? Just going through and asking some of these questions, I think is going to be incredibly enlightening. And finally, here's the next one that's getting more into the implementation of, do you have a basic EV charging infrastructure? Yes or no, right? And then kind of going from there. I think sometimes this topic can get so big that people get lost in it and they don't know where to start. So hopefully this gives you some direction with that. And for sake of time, I hope you understand why I couldn't go through each of those, but hopefully, after the weekend, you enjoy going through that. All right. So with all of those, how do you find money? And I think, like I said, Julie and Yosti already talked a lot about different financial funds that are out there. Obviously, it sounds like you just need to call them and talk to them and figure out those, because they have pretty great methods of that. But with Schneider on the private side, we're really constantly looking for things like that too. So I don't know if people are advertising to private sector as well, but that's something that we're constantly looking for, and helping our clients source is finding different creative funding methods. So you mentioned IIJA or the Inflation Reduction Act. Those are constantly ones that we can implement these different sustainability and decarbonization improvements with, or modernizing infrastructure, or, being able to mitigate things for extreme weather issues and have some resiliency in place. So those are just a few, but really it's also utility rebates. It's the energy savings performance contract model that we used on that Dallas County project. And then another one is energy as a service. So if you haven't heard of energy as a service, what it is it's just converting this traditional microgrid, this having solar arrays up there, and instead of being this massive upfront cost where you're personally investing into this big project there, where then you have to figure out all the financial resources, all the expertise to have on staff, which is obviously a big ask. It's actually turning it into where it's a service, just like your cell phone bill coming in. We'll actually run it, and then it's just a monthly fee, where it's actually a lot of times funding itself from the energy that it's saving and creating there. So that's what Alpha Structure is. Green Structure, which is just another company within Schneider Electric. All right, here's a few case studies. I can drop these in the chat, or I'll probably just have these sent out with the slide deck, but I wanted to provide these because these are a few other big projects. Again, for sake of time, I don't have time to go through all of them. But this resilience blueprint for local governments is great. Again, besides that roadmap that I already put on there, this is another one that's really good. This one up there at the Port Authority of New York. I don't remember exactly how big, but it says it's the largest rooftop solar array in New York City. Um, and so over there at the Port Authority and at JFK. And then really just next steps, I want to be mindful of time, is just to complete that sustainability roadmap. Just take 10 minutes, walk through it, talk to your teams about it, and reach out to us once you do it, just with what your scores are, kind of where you're sitting, and we'd love to help support you in moving forward with that. Then I also included some expert tips on other funding mechanisms too, in addition to what you already have.
Awesome. Thanks, Chaz.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so now we're entering into the facilitated conversation questions. So for those of you that are on the call, if you have any questions, please feel free. You can either raise your hand if you feel brave on coming on camera and microphone, or you can also pop your questions in the chat. I do have a couple for you guys. So, and I'm gonna tap Cody for this one too. So, you all deal with local governments, with, business owners and building owners. So, what are some unique funding and financing challenges that public building owners face that you've seen and talked with them about? Because I think when we're dealing with local governments, right, and public building owners, I think some of the things that we've seen is, especially for some of our smaller communities, right, their bank isn't super high, so they don't really have a ton to invest in, or they don't even know where to get started.
I can talk about what I've seen just to kick things off. Um, at least for some of, like Julie mentioned, some of our smaller rural communities, and I think Yosti mentioned this too. But a lot of them are wearing many hats. There might be just one or two volunteers that work for the village, and so really understanding that and kind of walking through some of the different requirements that come along with some of this funding, especially some of our federal funding that has extra federal requirements they may not be, aware of or have dealt with before. So I think that's been one of the main things that I've encountered is kind of walking them through that process and sharing resources as I can. So yeah, that's just one I've picked up on.
Yeah. And kind of like to add on to that too is like making sure that they have enough time to like go through everything. If they are wearing multiple hats and like it's on them to, complete the application. And I think you guys highlighted it too, is like in your presentation that, making that application process easy or as straightforward as possible, but also being available, like if they do need help or if, you know, maybe you don't have the answer right away, but like working with them to kind of come up with the answer so that they could get their questions addressed. But I think right now with like EECBG or some of these federal funds is the like LCP tracker requirement and navigating that with them and trying to figure out how to best address their questions there. Because I think for some of us, like our state agencies, it's also new to us and trying to give them the best guidance possible so that they're successful in making sure that they're being compliant.
Yeah, I
It's
think
like you're learning together.
great. Yeah. Cody can probably talk about our experience with the LCP tracker because I've delegated that to him because, no thanks. But that was the one thing that we definitely saw was the application, right? I don't need them to write me an essay and tell me all their life goals, right? Short and simple. What do you want to do? What are the savings that or, what are you hoping to accomplish? Keep it simple as possible. That's not like they don't have to overthink it. They don't have to write a book. I mean, some of these people, they're like, you want me to write an essay? What? Like, no, I don't need that. And then on the other thing, in terms of like timing, so what we did, Yosti, was we just had a rolling deadline. So it was kind of that first come, first serve. We have it open until we allocate all the funding. And we found that that worked a lot because then we could say we would do like announcements after we would award that would go out in like a press release or, through our different networks. And that would gain more traction from communities. They would be like, oh, somebody's doing this for this project. Cool. I'm going to go do that too.
Yeah, I think the thing happened was like we had the 180-day requirement though
That
too
was terrifying. I did
to
not like
to subaward, and we're like, okay, we gotta act on this quickly. But I think trying to act too soon and trying to select, like it really like cut down on the amount of time that first round we were able to provide the applicants because I think they were also like trying to get things together. So
right.
yeah, that 180-day requirement was
It was rough. We were
yeah,
nervous. We
yeah,
were nervous. Yeah.
yeah. And I know that like we saw applications come in like at the very last minute because they were using as much of that time as they possibly could.
Yeah.
And Julie, I love what you said about the rolling deadline because on a few different federal funds that had that, it makes it so much easier to evangelize once you have one win, then other
Hmm.
ones can kind of follow suit and people start
Yeah.
talking about it. And
Right.
it's not like you have to wait a year because people's attention span isn't long enough to remember it that far.
Well, and I mean, depending on what's going on, I mean, not only do you have like your normal deadlines, right? Tax season, fiscal years, all that normal budgeting, there's all the other pressures that these local governments and communities are dealing with. Like, we had a major ice storm come through here this spring where, I mean, like we had like 7,000 miles of line or something obscene like that that were broken with these ice storms, right? So people were out for like, 2 weeks almost of no electricity, right? So when a government's dealing with like issues on the ground like that, they don't have time to put in a grant application. Like that's the last thing on their mind. So really trying to meet communities where they're at. I think another question I have is one question for you, Yosti, is how did you guys market to your local governments? Like what avenues did you use in order to get the word out that this grant opportunity was open?
I don't recall where I got this list, but we did have a list of like an email list of all the different like local governments and like their main contacts. So I know that we reached out that way. And then we also promoted on social media. We use social media as a tool. And then during our like when we're asking for applicants or like to apply for the funding opportunity, we also hosted like a Q&A at one point. So even if they weren't in town to join us in person, they were able to call in and ask questions about the funding opportunity. And then I just try to make myself available as possible and like put my like, reach out to folks and let them know, like, hey, there's this funding opportunity. And kind of to go back to your first question, I think too at that time, like when we put our application out there, I think there were other applications out there too. So I think different communities had to prioritize, like, okay, do I want to apply for this? And like they had to think about that.
Yeah. And then, Chaz, out of curiosity, so when you're working with communities, right, and you know how much they save, right? I mean, 71 million, that's huge, right? Do you ever get reports back on what they do with that and how they reinvest it back into their community?
Yeah, so a lot of that's to actually fund all of those infrastructure improvements. So where the chillers are getting upgraded, these just really antiquated equipment that's in there or whatever, it would be a really big capital investment to do that. But
Hmm.
instead, they're taking those savings and funneling them back. And I don't know if everyone does this, but I know for us, we take a very conservative approach. So the goal is always to have even higher utility savings that can fund
Right.
more versus less.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So question on this one. So when states choose to work with local governments and, publicly owned buildings, in order to demonstrate, successful energy efficiency measures and kind of that lead by example, how are you tracking the impacts and the ability for these projects to truly lead by example? So like, for instance, so if you created like an energy champion within like the community, like how do you, scale the staff and move that forward? For example, kind of in the Detroit area, We've been working with the city of Detroit, similar to the Dallas County, to, identify all their municipal buildings, really track down on getting the energy. I mean, they had like vampire energy bills, like they didn't even own the building anymore, but they were still paying for the energy, right? So like some of that stuff. And just over the years, they've really been able to kind of increase the staff. And now they have the Detroit 2030 district, and they've got building performance standards that they've put in place. Like, what do you guys see in your state and how these communities are able to kind of lead by example for other buildings within their areas? Or maybe not yet. Maybe they're not at that point yet.
I don't know if we're at that point yet. And I think, well, and then I feel like Alaska is just so unique to the rest of the continental US. Because yeah, our communities are pretty small, and there's not there's rarely a road that leads to them. You have to fly in.
Right.
Um, but I think that, once a community is successful with like the projects that they're doing, I think it really like encourages them to continue to like seek out funding to continue to do similar projects or projects that need to get done, right?
Yeah.
But it probably gets shared most likely regionally, like with the surrounding communities. But then I think, Anchorage is it's a hub for for Alaska. So I think, whenever we have like these conferences or things like that, I think there's also that exchange happening where people are talking about like how maybe their community is successful with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think things like this too, Julie, help with that. And I had a comment on Lacey's chat there. She asked about just if people have had issues with people applying for the EECBG and with the federal funds freeze. And I was going to say that I know we've kind of paused on some different things just because of like EPA funding for I forget which one that was, but for a few of them that got pulled. So I think for funds that are still around, it might not be a bad idea to have some kind of notice to say, hey, these are still viable, because I think there's just some questions in the market that we've seen.
Yeah, and I would say, Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, we did not see a slowdown in communities that were applying for our funding when the funding freeze kind of came through. We did get questions like, is this real? Is this going to actually happen? Can we still participate? Um, so the message that we generally try to convey is, we have it for right now. Make sure you talk to your representatives that, this is important for your community, and apply as soon as possible that we can get this obligated. It's kind of like our message. And with that, we're just about at time, so I'll hand it back over to you, Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Julie, and thanks, Chaz, Yosti, Cody, for just your awesome perspectives and for sharing so much during our call today. Thank you all for attending, and for your questions. I guess for the good of the order, every slide and all the slides and recording will be posted on our Buildings Committee webpage, which was previously dropped in the chat and also emailed to every registrant. So don't worry about losing any of the links or content that was shared today. Outside of that, just really want to appreciate our panelists once more and all of you for joining today, and hope to stay in touch and that everybody has a great weekend. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jasmine.